I'd like to welcome to our studios this afternoon longtime cannabis activist, a former Vietnam veteran, and a former deputy sheriff, David Herrick.
Hi. Thank you for having me.
Dave, when you initially, did you use medical marijuana in Vietnam, or did you authorize using it?
Well, actually, I came upon using it by accident more than anything else. When you have people with various wounds, some of them are less severe than others, and those that are less severe, instead of using morphine on them, it was better to use cannabis because it eliminated their pain, and it also gave them, a calmer, more peaceful feeling, and therefore made it a lot easier for us to take care of medevacing those that were more serious. And in some cases, we were able to use them to help us medevac. So it was good. It was you could see it both ways. Some were opposed, and others were approval. They didn't really. My captain didn't really appreciate it. He didn't really enjoy having the odor, but he really didn't do anything to prevent me from doing it.
So did you go from your Vietnam duty to the sheriff department, or did you have?
Well, actually, when I came back from Vietnam, I went to Chapman College and got my EMT1, and I was working with Schaefer's Ambulance at the time as a ambulance attendant, and then later as an EMT. And I really got into the sheriff's department quite a few years after I got back from Vietnam. In 1970, I hired on to the sheriff's department in '75, so about 5 years.
Did you have much interaction with cannabis consumers in your experience with the sheriff's department?
Actually, I only wrote 2 tickets in my whole 15 years on the sheriff's department for cannabis use, and those were to people who weren't, as you would normally refer to as being cannabis users. They were users of other substances who happened to get caught with cannabis. So that was one of the reasons why they got tickets.
And so what are you doing right now? What are you busy
with?
Right now
I work for the Cannabis Association for Research and Education. It's a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and it's primarily a patient collective, and its primary function is to educate non-users and users alike in cannabis, and how to prepare cannabis, how to use cannabis, how to make cannabis butter, how to make edibles, how to make tincture, and how to do quite a few things that most people don't know about. And so we try to educate. We also try to educate new users as to the various ways that you can use cannabis, through vaporization, through bubblers, through bongs, if you will. That's basically the first way I used it, other than smoking it in joints, was through a bong. And I got introduced to bong usage when I went to Vietnam. And basically everybody in Vietnam had made homemade bongs out of the bamboo that was pretty prevalent throughout the country, so it wasn't hard to use bongs. But other than that, right now I vaporize, and I very seldom use it in any other form other than vaporization. But if I can't use it in vaporization, I'll smoke it, or I'll try to find edibles that work. And what my primary thing is, I think most medicinals are selfish in the fact that they want product that's going to work for them, particularly for them. And they're not like recreationals in the sense to where they will, get cannabis for, just for recreational purposes. They're actually looking at it for what its medicinal value is. And with 60 to 61 cannabinoids to, play with, there's various strains that possess certain cannabinoids that you can use for your particular condition. And then there's cannabis that contains cannabinoids that are of no value to you whatsoever. So I think right now what you're seeing is there's 3 types of people involved in this issue. You have medicinals, recreationals, and industrials, and I think basically that's the 3. And I think what we need to do really is we need to educate those who haven't come out of the closet, so to speak, and educate them as to the benefits of cannabis, not just as a recreational drug, but as a value to you medicinally. I mean, I'm not a small man. I'm a rather large individual for my height, and my doctor is constantly amazed at the fact that my My triglycerides, bad and good, are within limits, normal limits, that my sugar is within normal limits. When I should be a diabetic and on 8 different forms of medication, I only take one, and that's cannabis. I have COPD. I have not used Advair for over 2 years because cannabis is a bronchodilator, and eventually it'll work well enough to get you to where you don't need to use. Now, I'm not saying that medicine that exists out there is necessarily bad. I mean, there's medicines that you need, but to me, cannabis is really the only thing that I have found that really helps in my particular case. So.
Now, we've got on the ballot this fall Proposition 19, the Tax Control and Regulate Initiative. How do you think this is going to affect the cannabis market, the quality of medical cannabis that we're receiving?
Well, the interesting thing about tax and regulate is obviously there's 2 sides to the story. There's those who would like to see it, and there are those who don't want to see it. I think those that don't want to see it have vested financial interests. I think those that want to see it have more along the lines of legalization agenda, where they want to see it available. They want to see it on the street corners, and they want to see it available readily as alcohol or cigarettes are right now. Myself personally, I'm opposed to age limits. I think anytime you put an age limit on a substance, especially like cannabis, what you're doing is, well, it's back in the days when you were a kid and you wanted to get into a bar. And you found out that you could get phony identification, and there were some bars that you could get into, and there were some bars that you couldn't, and sometimes you got caught, and sometimes you didn't get caught. But the fun was trying to get into that bar, trying to get served, trying to buy, liquor at a liquor store with that ID. What's going to happen is you're going to prohibit a certain age group from doing it, and I know as I'm sitting here talking to you, they're going to find a way of getting it. So why put an age limit like 21 on it when 18 is sufficient? If you're legally allowed to be an adult at 18 and make decisions, certain decisions, vote, etc., you should be able to decide whether or not you want to use cannabis or you prefer not to, and if so, the legal drinking age on alcohol is 21, and I guess you're going to have to wait until you're 21 to legally consume alcohol. If you want to legally consume cannabis, right now the proposition calls for 21. I don't think that that holds water necessarily. I think there's a lot of things to the proposition that are good, but I think there's a lot of things that could have been made better. So I'm not saying don't vote for it, but at the same token, I'm also saying read the proposition. Make sure that you know what you're doing. One of the problems that we had in the beginning with 215 was that the court said that 215 was too vague, that it wasn't written well enough for them to sit there and legally decipher. Well, we come up with 420. They're not happy with 420. We have been jumping through hoops and through circles ever since 1996, ever since this was passed. And I don't foresee that changing with Proposition 19. What I do see is a market that's really suffering, and in a way that's good. I'm always in favor of low prices. I'm from the $10 lid school, and I would love to see pot go back to $10. If we can't do that, I'd like to see what Wham does, which is have $26 ounces. If we tax and regulate, you're going to put $50 on a tax automatically onto it, so the prices are going to have to result around that $50. And I don't think that, I think it's an open market that should be regulated to a degree as far as quality and the way it's grown and the way it's produced and the way it's manufactured, but I also think it should be produced and regulated price-wise as well. I don't think that, but then again, if you're going to, like with any other agricultural substance, you have a right to get whatever you can get for it. So,
Now,